What's your name? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And do you believe the 2020 election was stolen? According to the Washington Post, the RNC is sussing out whether new applicants, where they stand on the last election, using something of a litmus test, according to the paper. So on the subject of the last election, you might wonder where exactly the party itself stands. Does the RNC believe it was stolen, as their candidate continues to falsely claim? NBC's Garrett Haake sat down with the new co-chair of the party, Lara Trump, to ask what the president's daughter-in-law thinks happened in 2020.
Is it going to be the position of the RNC in 2024 that the 2020 election was not fairly decided or that it was stolen somehow?
Well, I think we're past that. I think that's in the past. We learned a lot. Certainly, we took a lot of notes. Right now, we have 23 states that have 78 lawsuits in these states to ensure that it is harder to cheat and easier to vote.
Joining us now, NBC News senior correspondent Garrett Haake. Garrett, I know you asked her a whole lot of questions there, but I'd like to focus, if you don't mind, on the 2020 election. What does it mean when she says the party has moved past 2020?
Well, I think her point is that they're trying to focus on winning in 2024, and that relitigating elements of, why Donald Trump talks about the race that he does isn't helpful at a party level. We know that to be true because we saw it in the midterms, where candidates who were kind of towing that line and making the idea of, the lines about a stolen election a key part of their platform lost up and down the ballot. And so I think what I saw from Lara Trump was someone who's trying to modernize the Republican Party to get them into the modern era with things like voting by mail and voting early, but struggling to grapple with the history of why Republican voters don't trust those systems and how much of an impact on that fact comes from her father-in-law, the party's nominee. And I think that tension is going to be at the heart of everything that happens here between Donald Trump and a Republican Party that's desperate to stop talking about this and start trying to focus on winning the next election. Well, that
tension is interesting because, as the Washington Post, as I reported at the top, there's apparently candidate interviews, according to that paper, where the candidates that are trying to work at the RNC are being asked how they see the 2020 election. So how does the party move past it if that's still a question that is being asked of folks who are trying to work there?
Well, I have my own reporting on this, Katie, and I think I'll say two things. Number one, my understanding of this was that this would be for folks who are working in specific swing states where the RNC is involved in lawsuits about how voting is going forward, or whether they did have concerns in 2020 about how elections were administered. And my understanding of these questions is they were sort of open-ended means to gauge how familiar people were with the election laws in their states and kind of how they would handle situations that might come up. But I think we also need to realize that this is not a fringe position within the Republican Party to question the 2020 election results. Something like 2/3 of Republican voters have some degree of question about whether Joe Biden won the election legitimately, as we know he did. You do the math, that's 50, 60 million voters. So the idea that people who would be working for the RNC might share similar questions should not surprise us, even if the data isn't there to back up that position. That's where a lot of the Republican Party is right now.
Good point. Garrett Haake. Garrett, thank you very much.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.